people will get stuck not knowing maybe what to do first, or they get stuck in their head thinking about it and they're not taking action.
Just write out, how long is each of these things going to take me? Cut out the decision-making middleman.
This particular episode is really about closing the gap between the plan or the intention and the starting point or the execution.
Welcome to N.E.T Collective, where we navigate everything together,
From classroom
to college,
To careers and beyond. I'm Kay McBroody, career coach and founder of Waterville Partners.
I'm Vanita Patel, school psychologist in private practice.
I'm Ruth Hayes, education professional and founder of Full CO Prep.
N.E.T Collective.
Navigating everything together, one conversation at a time. So we've talked a lot about this episode as we were planning, but how do we get started?
Very funny. That is what I call art imitates life, right? Okay, I think I got that right. Anyway, so great opener, Ruth. Have you guys ever wondered, why can't I just do the things I know that I need to do? Maybe you've set a goal. Maybe you've thought it through in your mind. Maybe you've even taken the next step and written it down in your planner or assignment notebook or whatever it is. And you say, okay, I'm going to promise and get it done tomorrow or start it tomorrow. Tomorrow comes and your heart's in the right place, but it still doesn't get done. Do you guys know anyone that often can, get in that loop?
Yeah. Well, and even I started referring clients to you because I would give them a plan and they would have these really good intentions, but they weren't executing on them. They weren't getting started. And so how do you get started?
And that is the root of the problem. We talk a lot about our executive functioning skills, and a lot of these skills are doing based, right? Do the planner, do the thing, manage your time. It's a lot of doing. But before you do the doing, you have to actually think about the execution of it. And that's where the gap really lies,
So people spend too much time in their heads, maybe?
Exactly. They spend too much time thinking about it. And I don't want to say too much time.
Right.
It's the amount of time that
but they don't
feel.
make that shift maybe from their mind to the activation.
Right. The cognitive is very different than the actual activation of it. And let's break it down a little bit, okay? I think that sounds familiar to a lot of people, and it's not because they're lazy. Again, you can have the best of intentions, and you can really care about something very well, but turning that intention or the plans into action, that's a whole other set of skills that our brain has to rely upon, okay? So in other words, executing the plan or even taking that initial first step to start can really be challenging, okay? So today's episode is about planning our intentions or planning the tasks versus the execution or the activation of the plan, okay? Or activating the actual plan, okay? And so we're going to ask ourselves, what's really getting in the way? And again, I'm going to nerd out a little bit and talk about the brain-based behavior first, okay? So let me paint this picture. All right, it's Sunday evening. You're sitting down before the week starts. You have good intentions. You look at the week ahead. You map out what needs to happen. You prioritize your tasks, whether it's, I've got to write 2 essays. I have to study for 3 exams. I have to do these chores around the house, whatever. And you have a sense of relief even because you know what to do and you've mapped it out. Okay, and then Monday arrives and immediately things start to feel different, right? Has that ever happened to you guys?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. You feel tired, other duties pop up, and you're not sure where last night's motivation, where it went, right? Suddenly, you're just kind of like a deer in headlights almost, where you don't know how to happen. And you tell yourself, okay, well, I'll just start later. I've got time, until later becomes later, and later becomes tomorrow, and tomorrow becomes the next day. And then you're in a panic because the deadline is due, it's just looming right in front of your face, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that happens, okay? And here's a key point. It doesn't happen because you didn't care. It happens because planning and execution rely on different skills in the brain.
So what are those skills?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if you think about it, when we're planning, that's a cognitive task. That's a task where you're thinking about things, okay? And planning actually happens in mostly ideal conditions. But execution the actual doing of the thing, doing of the task, happens in real life. It happens, when it's supposed to happen. So in actual real life. And the distinction really does matter because we often misinterpret what's really going on. Okay. So parents may assume that a teen that's, not following through or is being, they're being irresponsible or unmotivated. And it's very unclear as to why, why aren't you doing this? Even though you're supposed to do it. What happened? And the teen may be thinking, what's wrong with me? If I know what I need to do and I care about studying for the test, but I'm not, able to follow through on the things that I know I need to do. And, adults, Kay, you work with a lot of adults, right? Mm-hmm. Do you see that even with adults that are bright and high functioning?
They are. and people will get stuck not knowing maybe what to do first, or they get stuck in their head thinking about it and they're not taking action. And that's actually why I started referring clients to you, was mm-hmm. because I would help them create a really great plan and have everything going behind it. And then they wouldn't execute. Mm-hmm. So
it can almost work at cross purposes. Sometimes the plan is so perfect and pristine that if you do anything, it's like a betrayal.
Right. That's the other piece. You're absolutely right about that, Ruth. It's like if I miss a beat even a little bit, or if I start at, 5:05 and, I was going to start at 5, I'm already thrown off. So we have to let some of those perfections or perceived perfections just go, right? So, again, planning is mostly a thinking activity, and it happens when you're mostly calm, reflective, and not generally under pressure. You're using the part of your brain that imagines the future or organizes the information and maps out the steps, okay? So does that part make sense, right?
Yes.
We know that
right.
part. The execution, however, happens in real time in the middle of distractions, in the middle of fatigue, in the middle of overwhelm, and also in the middle of that this task feels so big, the perceived bigness of it, So there's really a disconnect between the two. There's a disconnect between what I think a task should look like and feel like and be like to how it's actually going to be when I'm activating it. And that disconnect between the two is because our brains are tapping into two different skill sets. They're not the same.
Right.
Okay. So to follow through, your brain has to activate the energy. It has to activate and manage its attention. It has to resist easier alternative competing interests like the phone or scrolling, etc., right? And you also have to be emotionally, regulated to do the thing. We've talked a lot about things that we've put off, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
I know I've put off, like I mentioned it before, my website. And Kay, I know we've talked about the book thing. It's like and when you really dig deep and think about why are we putting those things off? It's typically a regulation thing. It's typically an emotional thing. It's typically I'm motivated. I know you want to be successful in everything that you do.
Right.
We all do, right? But what stops us is really the emotional regulation piece, the attention piece that, is really separate and not cognitive. It's more of an emotional thing,
right,
related to those tasks.
And how do you bridge that gap?
Yeah. Well, before that, there's another piece to this that I want to focus on regarding our, how our brains factor into this and how our brains are wired. Our brains are motivated to move away from perceived threats. So our brains are wired to move away from perceived anything that would feel displeasurable or
danger, right? The fight or flight.
Exactly.
Fight, flight, or freeze.
Exactly.
Right?
And then there's fawn, which is a whole other thing. Yeah.
Okay.
So our brains want to move towards safety, security, pleasure. And so even when we want to do something, and even cognitive, if we know we have to do something, our brains, if we sense a piece of a threat or some amount of threat about that task, we're immediately going to start looking for things to move away from that and move towards something that's going to make us feel secure and safe. Okay. And with so many competing interests literally at our fingertips, like the phone, like, scrolling, like, streaming an episode, or just pretty much anything else that's within our environment that can move us away from that discomfort, we're more likely going to do that. So that's a really important. So I think just being aware of that, knowing that this is just how our brains are wired. Okay.
Can we trick our brains? Can we somehow help our brains see it as a safe thing?
I think one way is really to reframe.
Okay.
It's really to reframe. So if starting something feels risky and confusing and boring or emotionally uncomfortable, your brain may push you towards something that feels easier or safer in that moment. But the irony of that is the more we move away from what we know we need to do and towards that safety and comfort, what happens is that task that we need to do creates more of a stress, right? And so just knowing that, so I wouldn't say that that's not necessarily some type of trickery.
Right.
It's more just knowing that, you have to weigh your options here.
Right.
You have to weigh your options. I can continue to just scroll on my phone or look at what people are going through on social media. But what I need to do is just going to get further and further away from my intention.
Well, okay. And I always tell clients, eat the elephant one bite at a time. Like try and break it down into some kind of small piece. And maybe that is part of the starting piece.
That certainly is. And so, yeah. And so if you're listening and you're thinking, okay, this is totally me. I know what I need to do, but I can't do it. I still need to do the thing. So what do I do? Okay. So number one, you want to start super small. Start super small. Make that initial step almost ridiculously small. I mean, that's why there are books out there, that talk about, tiny habits or atomic habits. These are phenomenal books. And though they're very different in terms of just specificities, the overall arching, theory is the smaller you can start something, the more likely you're able to follow through with it. Okay. Yeah. So instead of, I have to write this introductory paragraph, just open up your laptop and write the first sentence, or just open up your laptop.
Yeah. That's infinitely more than nothing.
That's right. Start small. Instead of, I've got to clean my room, start with walking into your room and just picking up the dirty clothes that's on the floor and putting them in the basket. Just start small. Action creates motivation more reliably than motivation creates action. So think about that for a second.
It's funny. I was always trying to figure out and discern motivation with my clients. They're trying to pivot their careers or launch their careers. And I've been trying to figure out, well, how do you measure this? And if you give them a clear direction, the direction, then they'll be, they'll follow with action. And now I'm finding that it's the action that will drive the motivation, to your point.
Right. Yeah.
And so I've had this shift with my clients even in that aha.
Mm-hmm. And especially for our individuals with executive functioning issues, that making that initial action, there's a sense of success. And with that will breed the momentum, and then you go on to the next step. So to me, when I think of it that way, that the action creates motivation versus the other way around,
right?
What does that tell you? Start. Just start
with something.
Start minuscule steps and go from there.
Yeah, and to build on what you said, Kay, I think the chunking can also help with that. Something I see especially students do. If there's a big project or something they have to do, they'll sit down, I have this hour to work on it, and they'll waste 15 minutes. I don't want to say waste, use 15 minutes of it trying to decide what to do. So I'll say, in addition to chunking it down, just write out, how long is each of these things going to take me? So if you have a half an hour to work with, okay, I know what I'm going to do. And you kind of cut out the decision-making middleman.
That's right. Right.
Good. Yeah. Great point.
That's a really good point. Yeah. And I love using the term roadmap, and this is a good segue into the second strategy that does work is, when you think about a roadmap, there's a start and an end, and there's multiple steps in between, right? I don't want people to think about the finish line, because that may be too overwhelming. That may be why they're not able to start. Focus on the starting and don't focus on the finishing yet. Okay. We are giving you permission. Ruth, Kay, N.E.T, and I, all the three of us, we are giving you permission to not think about finishing. Just reframe that mindset.
It's a journey.
Exactly.
I mean, it's kind of like if you are in the car and you're just locked onto that destination, you're going to miss all the interesting sights and things along the way. And maybe your task isn't super interesting, but you're going to learn at each and every step. So I think that being able to just be present and be in the moment and tackle one piece of it is so valuable.
Yeah. And this particular episode is really about closing the gap between the plan or the intention and the starting point or the execution. It's really not, for the purpose of this episode, it's really not about finishing yet, because there is no end of the journey or finishing if you don't start. So we want you to start small, make it very small, and focus only on the starting point, okay? Because when the task feels endless, and oftentimes for our individuals that struggle with EF, the tasks do feel too big. They feel monstrous. Yes. So the brain is going to resist. It's going to fight you on that. Okay? So give yourself permission to do just one short burst of whatever the thing is and name it. And, that will lower your threat level. That'll lower the brain's threat level. Okay? And that may be something like, you may say to yourself, I'll work only for 10 minutes and then reassess. And if you reassess and think, okay, I think I want to keep going, great. And if you reassess and say, I'm done, I can't, hey, that's 10 minutes more than you did before you started. Okay?
Yep.
So, but I think you will find that most of the time, once you're engaged, you'll continue. And even if you don't, you still moved forward and then you start again. Okay?
Got it.
All right. And the third thing is make the task visible and concrete. One thing we do know, we are really good with our defense mechanisms. So if it's out of sight, it's out of mind. Okay? So especially when we're under threat. So our brains are not great at holding plans internally while juggling everything else. So the more you can make the tasks that you need to do visible, they're on your mind. They're there. They're inescapable. Okay. And the more energy you're going to start attracting towards it, or hopefully. Okay.
Yeah.
That is why things like planners, sticky notes, visual reminders, or even alarm reminders can be really helpful. Not because they magically create discipline, but because they'll reduce the cognitive load and move you closer to that start point.
Perfect. I do that even with returns or things that I have to do.
Oh, yeah.
I used to squirrel them away.
Yeah.
And now I have a spot that's very visible so that I don't like to look at clutter. So I am motivated to take action.
That's great.
Because I see it.
That's great. That's funny you say that, because I do that too in our mudroom. All my returns, my Amazon returns or whatever, it's got to be right there, because if they're there, I can't get to my coat.
Right.
Or my shoes.
Exactly.
So it's like,
right.
I'm going to make it a little uncomfortable for myself.
Right.
And so I can get to it.
Yeah.
Interrupt the autopilot.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So we've got the start. So what are the three so far?
Lower your entry
the
your barriers to entry. So,
yeah.
so start, which is another fancy term for start ridiculously small.
So start small. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Okay. The second one is reframe your thinking.
Yep.
Focus on the starting, not the finishing.
Yep.
This isn't an episode about the whole task. It is about the starting, because, we want you to just be able to take that first step.
Yep.
And the goal will be to keep that momentum going.
Visible.
Third one is to make the task visible and concrete. Okay? Because our brains aren't great, again, at holding things internally. And we want to be able to, make things accessible.
Got it.
If it's there, they're on the brain, you're more likely to be attracted and get to it. Okay. The fourth one is change the environment so that the task is easier than the alternative. Okay. And what I mean by that is, guess what? If distractions are easy to access, then guess what's going to win?
Distractions.
The distractions are always going to win. Most likely, the distractions are going to win. And what I mean by that is, if you're already struggling to get started on something and you have your phone near you and you have, your snacks near you and you have whatever else, your laptop with all your games, those are probably going to be louder. And remember, our brains like pleasure. We like safety. We like security. We like fun, rather than what we see as something that's going to make us uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. So change the environment so that, making those simple changes such that you put your phone in another room. It'll still be there when you've completed your 10 or 15 minutes, clearing your workspace, opening the materials in advance, choosing a quiet location can really dramatically increase the chances of you starting. Have you guys ever had success with that, or?
100%. I think clearing the space is a really, really important one because you can kind of get into a sort of positive procrastination where you sit down to do one task and you realize, well, I can't work on this paper. I need to, straighten up all these books, or I need to dust in here. I haven't vacuumed in ages. And those things do need to get done in a certain sense, but they're certainly not a higher priority. Right. So if you already have that done, if you already have a plan for when you're going to do your chores, or, you sit down and do it every week, you don't have to worry about it in the moment.
Right. Isn't that funny how our brains work that way? Like I think you made me laugh the other day when you said, oh, I'd rather empty the dishwasher than, go through other work that you have to do. I've got to have you over, Ruth, so you can empty my dishwasher, because that is, that takes, you must really not like what you were needing to do in order to empty the dishwasher. But yeah, that is exactly how our brains work. It's like the lesser of two evils,
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. And then the last thing I want to say is that adding structure in the form of another human will add accountability. So we've talked about body doubling. Do you want to explain what that is? It'll come up in multiple future episodes, but...
Yeah, it's basically bringing a buddy. So sometimes it's really difficult for us to get motivated just within ourselves to do something because there's kind of no one looking. So if you have a friend come over and just hang out with you while you clean your floors or work on a paper, or, this is why study groups can be so effective, or, your dissertation group, Vanita, because you can just be an accountability partner for someone else. And a lot of times it's just so much easier to get started when there's someone else getting started with you.
That's right. Yeah. So built in the accountability, or if you can't find someone, because we're all busy, we all have things to do. I would say, okay, Kay, I'm making you responsible for me. Make sure you ask me, tomorrow if I did X, Y, and Z. Guess what? I'm not going to want to let Kay down. I'm not going to want to, answer her question like, no, I didn't do it. Or, you know what? I got through half of it. Hey, that's better than nothing, but make sure the person that you're going to for accountability, you feel safe with, secure with, who's not going to judge you.
Right. I've done that for friends before where they'll say, oh, make sure I do blah, blah, blah. And so I will send them a text. And because I have an Apple phone, you can schedule it to be sent later.
Right.
So I'll send it to 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. It'll be the first thing that they get to. And that's why also with my clients, one of the action items when we create their action plan, they have to identify a career buddy.
Oh, I like that.
Somebody that they can, and it doesn't have to be somebody that's looking for the same job that they are, but somebody that they, again, feel safe with, that they could, check in with once a week. How are you doing on your search? And how are you doing on your search? And, I found some companies that might be a fit for you. And, they found companies that might be a fit for me. But just somebody that you can chat with on a consistent basis that is in a similar situation. So that's back to your body doubling or study groups.
Right.
And finding people that are trying to do the same thing you are.
Yeah, and that is so helpful on a few different levels. That shared interest, I think, in your building community, which we're not collective. That's what we're all about.
Right.
And you had brought up my dissertation group. So decades ago, when I was doing my dissertation, I started a dissertation group, and even though I really struggled to get through certain things with my dissertation, I didn't want to go back to the group not having done my parts that I said I was going to do. I didn't want to have to say that. So that accountability piece is what motivated me. Now, someone can say, well, Vanita, shouldn't the motivation come from inside? Yeah, that's the ultimate goal, but if you're not there yet, you're not there yet.
What's the reality?
What's the reality?
Deal with what you have.
That is absolutely true. We're humans, and there are things that are going to get in the way of these big things that we have to do. Remember, our brains are responsible for that. We tend to shy away from what we perceive as threats. So figure out how you're going to make that threat minimized.
Yep.
Okay. So find an accountability buddy or group or whatever it is. Okay. Do you ladies have any questions about anything or want to share an anecdote or anything like that?
I was just going to throw in that sometimes that internal motivation can work better if you externalize it. So writing things down, crossing things out, giving yourself little rewards, which can be an activity you want to do, or even just, you don't have to wait for anyone to administer stickers to you. You can give yourself stickers,
Absolutely.
for anything that you're accomplishing. And
that's
that really
a great
works.
point. That is a great point. And even if you're doing something for a short amount of time, or for, the whole point of this is start small. Even if you're doing something for that first 10 minutes or that first step, that deserves a little pat on the back.
Yes.
And you can, do that, give that to yourself. Yeah. Okay.
I had someone that was studying for finals, and they called me and said, two of them were studying together. So they were body doubling. So they were helping each other study. This was a client of mine. And I ended up, every time they finished a chapter, they would text me, and then I would send them a fun emoji or a GIF. You know what I mean? And that was their stickers. But I mean, these are people in their, late 20s, but something to just feel proud of.
Right. Well, it releases that good feel-good chemical in your brain.
Yeah.
Oftentimes with my clients, they'll ask for that. Well, I'm not going to see you for a week, but can you just check in with me, because I don't trust myself to not have, that accountable person, for the whole week. And that's absolutely, look, use your resources around you as long as it works. Yeah. So when people struggle with the execution piece, the answer isn't try harder. The answer isn't care more. It's change the conditions around it. Okay. Change the conditions around it. And instead of asking, why aren't I doing this? Why can't I do this? Reframe the question to, what would make it easier to start right now, or to start when I would like to start, so that I am not freaking out and getting anxious when it's too late or too close to that deadline. Okay. And again, the goal isn't to become perfectly disciplined or endlessly motivated. That's not humanly possible. It's to understand how your brain works and to create supports that make action more possible in real life. And by real life, that does mean being human with, overwhelm and being afraid of not performing or having the end task not, look as good as you want it to be. But again, it just starts with starting. Can't make it more simple than that.
Awesome.
Okay.
So on that note, we could end.
We did it. We started
the conversation and we ended it. And hopefully they enjoyed the journey along the way.
That's right. So thanks for being here, everyone, and for taking time to understand how your brain works just a little bit better.
If today's conversation resonated with you, please share this episode with anyone who may need it, and follow us at netcollective.org or wherever you get your podcasts so you won't miss what's next.
We are N.E.T Collective,
navigating everything together, one conversation at a time. Thanks for listening.